Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. It's County Championship preview week. We'll be talking also about the new grumblings from recently axed England players, the rumblings around the Shires, a ball tampering story in the PSL, one of the better travel-related cricket stories that you're ever going to hear, and another bit of nonsense from young Vaibhav Suryavanshi at the start of the IPL. I'm Yaz Rana, and with me this week are Ben Gardner and Katya Whitney. Before we start today's show, a reminder that we are incredibly busy on the old Patreon, even though the international summer is yet to begin. During the whole county season, actually, we do an additional podcast on top of the Patreon weekly that is just about the county game. So during that first bit of the summer, that is just on the championship. But when the Blast starts, that becomes about the Blast. And when the One Day Cup starts, it becomes about the One Day Cup. So get involved there. Loads of action on the Patreon over the next few months. Confession early on, I've just come back from holiday. I'm really tired. So if this is an efficient and quick pod, that'd be really good. I've also had a disastrous day on the tech front. As you viewers on YouTube will see, I don't have a laptop. So I've gone old school with written notes in front of me. So if we can be efficient with your answers.
So we're really hanging by a thread.
Yeah.
And you can't fact check us as well. So.
I can't fact check you live as well. So you guys could say anything. In the spirit of a county championship preview, Harry from the Wisden Discord asked, how long will it be before we're all talking about bad light regulations in the county championship? Week 1 or week 2?
Yeah, I mean, definitely one, 2. There could be other regulations that we're talking about as well. I mean, we sometimes have bad light in the studio, don't we? Where we have to stop recording, light stops podcasting somehow because the sun sets at just the wrong angle and starts getting you in the eyes. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Well, let's go straight into it. Katya, who's going to win the county championship in 2026?
I'm going to be really boring and it's going to be Surrey because it just is going to be Surrey.
I don't think that is a boring answer because they didn't win it last year.
Yeah, but they won it every other year for the end of time. I think if you look at the way it's going to work this year, they're going to have their England players for probably much more of the championship than they did last year, even if, for Ollie Pope manages to retake his number 3 spot or whatever. Having that chunk of England players in there for the first part of the season and then potentially having them for even more of the season, I think that's just going to end up being too much. They've got consistent overseas signings this season, but the real kicker, I think, is having Rahul Chahar for the back block of championship games in September. He took 10 for in the one match he played for them last season, and that sounds very, very ominous. And I really think even if Surrey are behind at the back end of the season, that could be something that really sways the championship towards the back end, is having that quality of an overseas player around for that block of games all through as well at the back of the season. Yeah. I mean, potentially, I know that you guys aren't massively keen on it, but I really think Somerset could give them a run for their money. If anything, just so I can talk more about them and having potentially the existential Greek tragedy of Thomas Rue potentially taking his brother's keeping gloves off him. But yeah, I think Somerset could also be really decent. They're just a really well-balanced side, in my opinion, especially with Archie Vaughan in. So I think it's either going to be Somerset or Surrey, very heavily lean towards Surrey, and Notts could just sneak it. So I've given you 3 that I think are going to win it.
I like the idea of the Rue parents having to get involved. So it's like, Mum said it was my turn to keep wicket. The Surrey thing is just... it's just daddy's home, isn't it? That's what we're all excited about, to see what the Stewie effect is there. Having been, away for a season, he comes back and says, oh, what's happened here? I go over 1 year and you guys don't win the county championship, and he comes back and actually seeing how big that effect is, because theoretically, he's not even technically a coach. It shouldn't have that much sway, and yet just his presence around the club is so big. The thing that I wonder looking at them is that it wasn't just missing England players last year, and it wasn't just the lack of sort of continuity. They used 27 players in the county championship, which I think does have an effect in the end. I think the worry for me is that there is just a little bit of that they weren't very good last year and they almost finished second. That means that they're going to be in the mix this year, but was also last year the beginning of a sort of transition. I think Rory Burns is interesting. I wonder, is he just teetering on the edge of perhaps being a bit of a slight problem in that side, as a guy who has loads of authority and is really useful to have, but is perhaps passes best as a batter. And you look at that bowling unit where Warren and Clark have for so long done so much for them on the bowling front. How long can they continue carrying that attack where we're just seeing the signs of a little bit of decline there as well? Fisher, could well pick up some of that burden, but I think there are also I don't think it's guaranteed that last year was just a blip, but we could very much be sitting here in 6 months' time and saying like, well, yeah, sorry, 4 out of the 5, the dynasty continues.
If Alex Stewart's back, then Ben Folkes has got his keeping coach back as well.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, last year, Surrey only win 2 out of their 7 home games. They only win 5 games across the summer. And I think your point around their bowling attack is a fair one. That I basically think in county championship winning sides, the most important thing, obviously you have a couple of guys who score 1,000 or so runs, but the most important thing is, can you reliably take 20 wickets? They didn't do that last year. And the core of the side that took them to 3 championship titles in a row, the core of the bowling attack, Jordan Clark, Dan Worrell and Kemar Roach. Well, Roach is going to play his cricket at Chester Street this year. Dan Worrell and Jordan Clark are both in their mid-30s now. And they've got lots of exciting players beneath that. Tom Laws, Gus Atkinson, who we'd say beneath that because he'll play fewer games than the rest. Matt Fisher, you mentioned too. Those aren't guys yet who have taken 50 championship wickets in the season. And that is the sort of thing that championship wins are built on. But I also agree with you, Katya. I think Rahul Chahar being available for 8 games, the structure of the 26 season is slightly different. So last year, there's a few more games in the back end of the season compared to normal. He took 8 for 51 in that game against Hampshire at the end of last season. He could be a complete game changer for them. Ben, you think Notts are going to retain the title? Is that right?
I think so. Yeah, I go back and forth to them and sorry, but I'm on Notts at the moment. Basically because I look at them and I just can't see them being, I don't see where they're going to get worse than last year, and I can see some place we're going to get better. So they've got, the one big thing is they don't have Mohammed Abbas for that last half of the time, which he was brilliant last year. But they do have Fergus O'Neill for a bit longer than they had last year. They got him for that full first block rather than the first
He's like the Aussie
month.
Sam Cook, basically. He's 24, 25 years old, averages 20 first-class cricket. Brilliant for Notts last season.
And also averages 25 with the bat as well. He's a brilliant cricketer who is, the reason why he hasn't played for Australia is because that speed gun is just a little bit low, but I think it could well happen in the 2027 Ashes possibly. Tung, I was surprised to see only played the 6 games last year, even though he took 31 wickets, because he is just a bit of a wicket-taking cheat code. And obviously Ducker only played the 1 game last season and is going to be there for that whole first block and, maybe squeeze in a couple at the end as well. And then beyond that, actually last year, no one had like a properly freak season, which helps on 2 fronts, I think, with the defence. One is that they're not susceptible to a massive drop-off from any one player. And it also means that actually, despite winning the title, there's not loads of players who are hugely in the England frame. I think Haseeb Hameed is almost the one. He was exceptional last year, averaging 65 odd. And he is just one of the best bats in the country. And you almost have the situation where Notts want him to do, well, but not too well at the start of the season, because you could see how, especially if him and Duckett really strike up a partnership, England would just be like, well, let's just have that in the test side. You almost want Duckett running him out a few times just to keep his average sort of 48. So he's a gun player in the county championship, but not quite getting the England go.
I think Notts have not the best total depth in terms of the volume of players. I think they've got the best depth in they can lose a few players to their first 11 and there's barely any difference. Ollie Stone, there'll be weeks where he doesn't get a game. There'll be weeks where Brett Hutton, who's a wicket-taking machine and has been for years, might not get a game. If Ben Duckett is available at the start of the season, Freddie McCann, who's a 20-year-old who's already played for the England Lions, averaged best part of 40 last season, he's probably not getting a game. And they've got players like Lyndon James, Liam Patterson-White, who maybe a little bit with Patterson-White aren't really that close to the England conversation. And they're going to play 14 games this season. Someone like Farhan Ahmed probably doesn't get in the team initially. So there's serious bench stress there. One thing I think is interesting, they don't have Mohammed Abbas. And it was essentially Notts' call to not retain him. So they have looked at the test summer, seen that Pakistan are coming over to England, and basically took a punt and been like, well, Abbas probably will play in that. And if we can get Fergus O'Neill for the first bit of the summer, then that is a risk to get Abbas in there. He might not be around very much. But what I find quite funny is Abbas's replacement is another Pakistani player, Muhammad Ali. So it's basically, we want you because we think your country won't want you, which is quite a nice way of doing it.
And sorry, just on Muhammad Ali, because I think if England fans will remember him being bad, basically, when he played in that 2022 series and just got hammered everywhere. I think if you're a Notts fan, look at that thing like here's a step down. He's definitely a step down from Abbas, but I think he's probably better than what he showed then in that series. He came in having played I think 6 games back to back in the Cardi Azam Trophy. Their schedule puts the county championships to shame, and I think that people who who have been involved in Pakistan cricket actually think he is quite good. Basically, he's not a total no hope, which I think you might think if you remember that series well.
Anyone else going to challenge for the title?
Well, I don't think they're going to challenge, but Leicestershire have come up, and
you're obsessed with this.
And just I think what you sometimes see both going in both directions is that teams can sometimes go down and have forgotten how to win, and therefore struggle to come back up. When you look at the strength of the squad and think like, well, how could Lancashire spend a second season in Division 2, for example? Sometimes you see a side that just is coming up and is cresting a wave of momentum, and like I hope that Leicestershire, at least I feel like they at least won't go down. I think they will surprise people by maybe staying up relatively.
There's a big difference between not going down and winning the county championship.
Sure, but I think that it's maybe not not impossible that they just because they were winning games in sort of not unusual ways, but just through the strength of sort of team collective effort last year, and that can be a good replicable recipe. Maybe I don't think they're going to win it, but because I think Notts are going to win it. So yeah, you've got a few, don't you? Do you have what Warwickshire you think are interesting?
I think Warwickshire are interesting in that they just have loads of bowling all-rounders and seam options, sort of replicating the Surrey model from a few years ago. If you just have like 7 or 8 interchangeably good quicks, that's quite a useful thing to have. And one of them's Chris Woakes. That could completely change everything. He's going to be the best player in the division. And if he's available for a lot, that's interesting. They signed Nathan Gilchrist, who impressed people during the England Lions tour down under over the winter. They've still got Oliver Hannah-Dolby. They've got Bo Webster in for a decent stint of this season. They've re-signed Keith Barker, who age 39 is still useful. They've signed Jordan Thompson, another seam bowling all-rounder from Yorkshire. Ethan Bamber is a good county championship bowler. And I really like Michael Booth, who played a handful of games at the start of the season and impressed people. He's slightly quicker than most county bowlers, and he's the sort of guy who, if he has a good 3 or 4 weeks, people are very quickly talking about him as a possible England bowler for the Test summer. So that intrigues me, and their batting, I've always thought, is fine. So if they can become a side that regularly takes 20 wickets, I think they could quite quickly come into it. I think Somerset are interesting. I think that their opening partnership has just been such a mess in recent years. If they can fix that this year, that could be quite cool. Thomas Rue has yet to play in the county championship, and he won't play in the county championship for the first bit of the season because he's got his exams. But when he comes in, that could be quite interesting.
Who haven't we mentioned? Have we mentioned every team in Division 1 as
not
a potential
yet,
one?
Not the ones we think might go down.
Not yet. If you were going by last year's table, the next side I would mention now, Katya, are Sussex, who will start the season with a 12-point deduction. Why are they starting on -12?
How long have we got?
Quite a long time, actually.
So it's interesting because before everything came out, I think Sussex might have been my pick as an outside bet to win Division 1 this year. They finished 4th last year. They have had really good overseas signings for the last couple of years. You know, they had Steve Smith famously. They've got Ollie Robinson as their new captain. They've got really good young players. Obviously, James Coles, who is, it's going to be a James Coles summer. Everyone's obsessed with James Coles. But with this 12 points deduction and with everything going on down at Hove, it just seems like too insurmountable burden for them to overcome. The one thing I would say is Paul Farbrace. So I was at the Sussex Media Day last week, and Paul Farbrace said despite all the financial stuff that's going on, they've kept everything around the team as much as possible the same. So not putting them in crappy hotels to stay in for their overseas county championship rounds, making sure that everything around that team was consistent. And when Paul Farbrace came in 3 years ago now, he had a 5-year plan for Sussex to win Division 1 of the county championship in the final year of that 5-year plan, and they're about to enter their 4th year of that 5-year plan, and he said that is now condensed into a 4-year plan, and his plan was for them to get promoted to Division 1 within 2 seasons of taking over, to finish mid-table, then to finish top 4, and they've done all of that on his plan so far. So I would say while that points deduction is very, very bad, I wouldn't necessarily put Sussex as a side to go down this year. I don't think they're going to go down, and I wouldn't bet against them to do very well. But how they've ended up in this mess is quite a convoluted story that goes back about, I feel like I'm starting like a Disney fairy tale or something. Like
it's definitely not a fairy tale.
No. But it was obviously like been a big story of the winter where they were reported as being in financial difficulty in late January. And then the ECB announced that they were in special measures in February. And as part of that, they have ECB oversight on all of their financial budgets. And the ECB have absolute veto on whether they sign any new players or even if they re-sign existing players. They won't have any new overseas players this year, and it's likely that they won't have any overseas players in 2027 either. So it's really, really strict conditions on their financial spending. And part of that is because in 2024, their accounts showed a £297,000 deficit in their spending. In 2025, it was 1.3 million. So that's an increase of over £1 million in their deficit at the end of the year. And you've kind of almost got to go back to 2017 for when this all started. So in 2017, Rob Andrew comes in as CEO, and he comes in and he embarks on this massive cost-cutting strategy because Sussex, again, the books weren't balancing in 2017. And he massively tightens budget. And that, while it does balance the books, it really has an effect on the field. So back in the early 2020s, Sussex were pretty much the worst Red Bull side in the country. They finished last in 2021, I want to say, in the County Championship.
They kept on fielding kids. One of them was James Coles, but others haven't made it.
Because basically all of their quote-unquote good players like Phil Salts, Chris Jordans, all of that were let go because their contracts were too expensive for Sussex to fund under Rob Andrews' regime. And it ended in a bit of a kind of members' revolt, which has also been part of this story, but has kind of now died down now. So they embarked on this cost-cutting measure, balanced the books, and there were quite a lot of positive things that happened during that balancing books operation. So there were some good investments that were made, some good investments into the ground. They redeveloped the pub that Sussex own into like a revenue stream, and in some buildings that they now can claim ground rent for. So there were some good stuff, but unfortunately they were the worst side in the country. So in 2022, they bring in Paul Farbrace and give him this much bigger budget in order to make Sussex a much more successful side on the field, which he does. Unfortunately, now it's come out that the books were not balancing off the field, and there is a connection between Sussex making this stride to become a non-100 hosting county who can compete with the big boys, who can compete with the big sides in Division 1, and they have done that. And as a payoff for that, they've massively suffered financially off the field. It's not a complete correlation, but it does have some link to it. And Peter Fitzboyden, who was the CEO who came in, who was CEO of Cricket Scotland, he came in and then at the end of 2023, and then in the middle of last year, he was let go under reasons we're still not entirely sure of. It was given personal reasons at the time. But what's clear now is that around the time Fitzboyden stepped down was around the time that the scale of this financial mismanagement was becoming clear to those inside the club. It was at the AGM last week, and the COO said that she was considering stepping down in August because of the scale of financial mismanagement that had been going on. And then it wasn't properly communicated to members until January, and it started to become more widely known in December. But that's why the ECB have slapped this kind of penalty on them. I think the wider story is more interesting in that we've just had £500 million generated from the sale of the 100 franchises to be reinvested into English cricket. And it felt like, it felt like to me last year that this was almost like a silver bullet. Like every winter we hear stories of counties struggling to keep the lights on and counties days away from folding. And it feels like if you've got £500 million, there should not be a county that's in this much financial struggle. And also what became clear is Sussex isn't like a single story. The ECB's red zone, as they call it, which isn't a purely financial metric, but it's used to judge. Ironically, it was brought in by Rob Andrew, but who's now working for the ECB. But it's a metric for judging how successful counties are. And as of the end of last year, there were 5 counties in their red zone, which takes in all these KPIs. And it feels like with that much money now around in the game, there shouldn't be counties struggling to the extent that Sussex are struggling. But either way, they are struggling. And it's 3 years, these ECB financial penalties. And it's going to be really, really tough for them over the next 3 years, if indeed they get out of it at all in the next 10 years even.
Ben, there are also revolts happening at Middlesex and Lancashire. They're quite different stories.
Yes. I mean, the Middlesex one is almost the Lord of the Rings to Sussex's The Hobbit, I think, where it's been going on for so long, and there's even more sort of details. I mean, they've had just, and even, I guess Sussex's, you could almost say there's definitely issues there just with mismanagement in general, but the fable, I guess, is that it's a team who are chasing on-field success at the expense of sort of financial stability. Middlesex, haven't come close to achieving either, essentially, and they've had issues with multiple people who have been in charge of the club, and they're currently without a CEO. They're having to basically borrow a CEO from the MCC who's been seconded there. And again, there's this thing where the ECB aren't going to just give them some of the 100 money to help them sort themselves out, basically to help them hire a CEO. The ECB essentially want that money to be spent on capital expenditure, not on operating expenditure. So they want it to pay for stuff that will then in future pay for itself, rather than just keeping the lights on.
The idea is if you just spend money on keeping the lights on, eventually that money goes away and then you don't have any money. So they want to make sure that the money goes into things that will produce money for counties in themselves down the line.
Yeah, exactly.
It is worth saying. So the 100 money was split up into chunks, and the first chunk of the 100 money was given to all 18 counties, and it was able to be spent on that kind of stuff. So a lot of counties have cleared their debts with that first chunk of 100 money. And then the next chunk of it, which is just on the non-host counties, that's being held in trust by the ECB per county for them to then present business plans to the ECB for them to reinvest into the county future.
Yeah, and I think I was at the ECB round table with Rob Andrew and Rich Goldstein, and they would see the paying off of debts as actually a sort of form of capital expenditure, because it means that you're not having to pay interest each year, so you kind of have more cash flow that way. But anyway, and Middlesex also have this peculiar situation where they obviously play at Lords, but they don't own Lords, and they can't really make money from Lords in the way that other counties can make money from their grounds. But they are also in like a big catchment area of players, so that should be a way that they have a big player pool, but that doesn't really seem to be working for them. So they are sort of just a quite wide-ranging mess, and especially because of the Lords thing. I know that they've been trying to get Merchant Taylors to be a home away from home, but it's never going to be sort of an international quality cricket ground that can bring in tens of thousands through the gates kind of thing. So that is an issue for them, and so there's sort of Gatting, I think, is leading the revolt there, and then at Lancashire, where it seems like David Lloyd is leading the revolt, the issue is almost in a way the opposite of the Sussex issue, where they think the county is too focused on finances and not enough on the playing side of things. And you have the club being in Division 2 now for a second consecutive season. They went age without a win. They were bottom for a decent chunk of last year. And Daniel Gidney, who runs things there, he's very openly, I'd say, enthralled to sort of Indian money coming in there. They're very pleased to partner up with the super giants up there. Even if you go on like the Old Trafford website, it's sort of it's events first and then cricket second kind of thing. And they feel like they've taken the Arthur ball up there. But I think actually Lancashire, I think, have probably been a bit maybe just insensitive with how they've handled that discussion with their members, in saying that there's a way to present this story that, look, we need to be a club that makes profit, that at the moment, you look at, if you come to a county championship game, it's great that you members are here, you love it, but look around, you can see that's not a thing that's going to make money. We've got to find ways to make money 12 months of the year, and it's not just about, how good can we be in these three competitions. And I think there's a way to have that conversation sensibly, which maybe Lancashire didn't have. And also they have a particular, I think, unhappy group of members just in general. They've had the Lancs Action Group, who I think may have now been renamed, were often just quite unhappy at various things. But there's flavours of this around clubs around the game. And actually, even the standard club membership is sort of a members model. You see it at Middlesex, they're talking about demutualising as well, which means moving from being a members club to being one either privately owned or publicly traded, or a different model, basically. And you do have a thing there where members, the thing they care about is the club that they support being really good at cricket. And actually, the thing that means that club can be successful and survive in the long run is not how good they are winning county championship games. It's so much other stuff. And that is just a trade-off and a balance we're seeing sort of working itself out now in this new world where new things are possible, but if they get it wrong, then they could be in even more trouble, because there's not going to be this money coming in a second time. On
demutualisation, though, before the 100 money came in, there were a few other counties considering demutualisation, and that is something that the 100 money has not necessarily, in Middlesex's case, put a stop to, but for a lot of counties it has stopped those conversations in their tracks of where they were potentially going down that phase. But Lancashire's a bit of a different case, but I can't think of an investment that would come into a county cricket club like Sussex, or like another kind of non-100 host county that would be a lucrative financial investment for both parties, if that makes sense. One thing I did think was at the Sussex AGM, it struck me that obviously you've got, the standard stereotypical image of a member of county cricket who's probably over 70 in a stripy blazer, and they're definitely...
That's not what I was thinking at all.
Was it not? There were definitely those people there. But there was also a more engaged, younger, and when I say younger, I'm still talking 40 plus, but a more engaged, younger, more reasonable membership who don't have an issue with the 100 and like the 100 and go and watch the 100, but have an issue with the way that the 100 has taken financial security, or they see that the 100 has taken financial security away from their county, or taken that kind of ability to almost like class climb away from their county. And that anger feels to me very much directed towards the ECB rather than the poor running of certain aspects of county cricket clubs, which I found interesting.
Who's going down, Ben?
Well, I do have Sussex as one of my two to go down, and I don't think it's a guarantee, as Katya says. They could have handled a 12-point deduction last season, but I think that what I can sort of see is that if they suddenly have a bit of a wobble, and then all of a sudden, you maybe have some players who are going to be out of contract, and then you can see that sometimes where, they end up signing a new contract, but then going on loan for the second half of the season because they're like, well, if you're going, just go now sort of thing. I can sort of see it just snowballing a little bit, I think. So I do have Sussex going down, and Glamorgan, it's boring, to say that one of the promoted clubs are going to come down, but that often does tend to happen. And I think that their success for me was a bit more dependent on a couple of freak seasons. And so either we're talking about Ace of Tribe as a potential England player in 2 months' time, or I think Glamorgan have struggled in their start to Division 1 life, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's not huge. I guess they weren't hugely tipped for promotion last year. Second of the two sides to go up, and their recruitment has been fine, but not excellent. So if you're comparing the two promoted side, Leicestershire have secured the services of Stevie Eskenazi, Jake Weatherall, Johnny Tattersall, Josh Davey, and Ajaz Patel. And a lot of that business was done early, partly because they basically knew they were going up in mid-June. With Glamorgan, their recruitment has been, it's not bad, but it's just less impressive than Leicestershire's. I mean, Ben, you were talking before we started recording about one of their overseas signings who, on paper, doesn't look like the most exciting overseas signing.
Yeah, so this is Ryan Hadley, who is it is tricky to work out when you just look at the stats what's gone on there, basically. So he's 27-year-old Australian. Cricket Info describes him as medium fast. He's played 15 first-class games for 36 wickets at an average of 38.
What's his batting like?
His batting average is a high score of 15 in those 15 games and an average of 3.66. So that is not great. They have got the services of Nathan McAndrew, who's been quite an underrated county overseas, and in Australia as well. He was just player of the match in the Shield final, and Ryan Harris, their coach, was saying that he should have played Test cricket already. So that is a good signing. But also he's not there for I think he's not there for April, and he's definitely not there for the run-in. So he's not going to be a transformative player, no matter how good he can be in that little gap.
A few other sides we've not mentioned yet. I think Hampshire are in real trouble. I think for a long time, when they were closer to the top of the table than the bottom, they were a strange side in that they simultaneously had 5 of the best players in the division, but then 5 or 6 players who I think would struggle to get into other Division 1 sides. And they are just weaker than they were. So they've clearly identified the overseas seam bowling market as one they wanted to attack. They get in Michael Neser, who...
No, they're not.
But as I said, they tried to get Michael Neser, and then Cricket Australia pulled him out. Then they tried to sign Jaden Seals, so 2 really good test match bowlers. Then Cricket West Indies pulled him out, and then they've replaced him with Cody Youssef, who played a bit for Durham last year. He's a fine bowler, but he's certainly not the calibre of Neser and Seals. One good sign they have managed to secure, especially given the flakiness of their top 7 over the last few years, is Jake Lehman as a local player, which is a pretty handy signing. But I think they only just stayed up last season, so I think they could be in trouble. And then the other 2 sides that we've not mentioned yet, Essex and Yorkshire. What are your vibes around Essex and Yorkshire?
I think Essex, I'm a I don't think they're going to challenge. I think I'm a reasonably positive on them. I mean, this time last year you might have thought they're going to lose Sam Cook for a chunk of the season. That's probably not going to be the case now, and they have bolstered that seam attack a little bit, adding Mitch Clean and Zaman Akhtar, and especially Zaman Akhtar. I think it could be interesting to see how he goes in that attack where he can properly unleash when there's sort of at least three very steady other bowlers in that attack. If it's Porter, Cook, and Harmer, no one is going for runs there.
And Viad Mulder as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think I'm broadly positive on them, and then Yorkshire, they were the other one. Yeah, and I think getting Sam Whiteman in on a UK passport, that is a canny bit of business. And they've got a couple of other Aussies as well in Jai Richardson for a chunk and Will Southern for a couple of games. But sometimes a couple of games, if someone can come in and win you those games, that is actually can do a big chunk of the work and help you stay up. So
we've also got Logan Van Beek and potentially getting Joe Root and Harry Brook for more rounds of the Championship this year. I think they could sneakily be not sneakily sounds awful, but I think they could be quite competitive. You've got Bairstow captaining, red-faced as ever. I genuinely think they could sneak by. They've signed, they've done some really good signings over the winter, and I think that could be an interesting one.
And then to Division 2, who's going up?
Durham, I think, are probably going up. I'm on the Ben McKinney hype train at the minute. I think Ben McKinney's going to have a brilliant season. I also think Emilio Gay is going to have a brilliant season. I think Durham were quite unlucky to go down last season, and I think that's not reflective of where they are as a side. I think their batting is really, really strong. Having Matt Potts available for a lot of cricket as well, I think is going to be really good. So I think Durham are probably going to win Division 2, and then I think probably Lancashire, although the second one I wasn't quite so clear on. I know you two aren't that big on Lancashire this year.
I think they definitely will be in the mix. I mean, I think if you use, the side that everyone thought would go up last year but didn't, Lancashire as a comparison to Durham, on paper, Lancashire have and had a really stacked top order. Durham's is, I agree with you, is certainly stronger in the strength in depth. And you look at it actually trying to work out, like if Stokes plays in May, for example,
exactly.
some really good players are not going to get into their 11. But Lancashire, part of the issue was some players who are very, very good county cricketers had poor seasons, but also their bowling attack wasn't great. And with Durham last season, that is a big part of the reason why they went down, is that bowling attack wasn't that good. And they've signed some interesting players. So Archie Bailey from Gloucestershire, Casey Aldridge, the all-rounder from Somerset, I think is potentially a very interesting signing. And then Kemar Roach, now aged 37, who's not been as prolific in the Championship in the last year or two compared to his previous work at Surrey. So I'm interested to see how Durham do. I agree with you. I think they will probably go up, but it's quite a lopsided squad at the moment. They've got lots of young seamers who are exciting, but they're all very young, and maybe a year in Division 2 would be good for them. But I can see them having a similar-ish year, not similar to the extent that Lancashire had last year, but that being the reason that doesn't get them up. I think Derbyshire are interesting in that they finished third last year, and they signed Mohammed Abbas, like basically the best seamer in county cricket. They've also signed Shoaib Bashir, who obviously everyone knows about, and Harry Moore, the young all-rounder, was basically injured for the entirety of last year. If he's available and Mickey Arthur really rates him, that could be quite interesting as well. I guess Ben Lancashire, it's quite interesting to see how the quicker guys do for them. They were fairly stable top 6 or 7. Jimmy Anderson's still about. But in Sakib Mahmood, Ajit Singh Dale, who they've signed from Gloucestershire, and Mitch Stanley, who's barely played county cricket but was on the Lions tour to Australia, if one or two of them go okay, they could do really well in Division 2.
Yeah, and the flip side to sort of the fact that they started last year so poorly is that they ended the season in mid-table, so they ended it sort of okay, basically. And if they basically corrected being in freefall, and it was things like Keaton Jennings should just not be a batter who is having bad seasons. He is like Tugan has been around for too long, but that was basically just happening because of everything that was going wrong at Lancashire. If they've corrected it enough that he is now a good player again, then that does change things quite a lot. So I think Lancashire, I think they will be in amongst it, but I think I'm with you that I would just be on the side of Derbyshire and Durham, and I struggle to see who could challenge those three, albeit that, obviously we wouldn't have said Leicestershire this time last year, it's not impossible that, a side just has sort of like a golden run. But those are the three that look to me reasonably stand out, I think.
Yeah, just add to the mix. I can see Worcestershire were, they stayed up in 2024 in Division 1. Tom Taylor's one of the best county bowlers going. We'll get to why they might be a little bit weaker than they thought they were last week later on in the show. But I think they could challenge. I think Northants as well. Calvin Harrison is an amazing signing. I think Chahal is set to come as well. So they're going to have two very good leg spinners. So I think we know what to expect from the pitches at Wantage Road in the back half of the season. And I know that Kent have really struggled recently, but I think they've made two really good signings to their bowling department. Matt Milnes, who 5 years ago was one of the best seamers in Division 1, and then Keith Dudgeon, who started last season spectacularly, but then got injured. He's around in theory for a lot of this season, so that could be a big deal for them too. Katya, you mentioned that you think Ben McKinney's in for a big season. JD on the Discord asked, which English opener do you think can be the top of the run scoring charts come May? So this isn't necessarily going to be someone who's going to be the England side come May, but who's going to be at the top of the run scoring charts?
Okay, I'm not actually saying Ben McKinney is going to be top of the run scoring charts by May. I'm saying in an ideal world in my head, Ben McKinney would be the top of the run scoring charts by May. I think that he's incredibly, incredibly talented. And I think over the last few seasons, I think, what you said about having the seamers who could benefit from a season in Division 2. I think Ben McKinney will absolutely tear up in Division 2. But I'm not saying I think he'll be top of the run scoring averages by May, but I think he could be close. I think Emilio Gay could genuinely be top of the run scoring pile by May. I think that's probably a more realistic bet. So my actual answer is Emilio Gay, but my shadow answer is Ben McKinney.
Just to add another Durham player to the mix, Alex Lees' record since not last played for England is amazing. Video editor Dan was sending me some stats about him today. He's basically averaged 50 over 4 years, and a lot of that is in Division 1. Now he's back in Division 2. I'd expect him to be doing very well as well. Ben?
I spun my wheel of many county openers and just landed on two names of guys who just always seem to score a lot of runs, but never talked quite enough about. One guy who never ever gets talked about, and maybe for reasonable reasons he's 35, but Louis Rees, it's just
that's just pure ageism.
yeah, but he's just got that's why he's never talked about for England, is what I mean. And
are you still hoping that you could be picked up by England?
remember, if anyone wants to know how old Ben is, just look up how old Tom Abel is. They're born on the same day.
Yes, do that. But so Louis Rees, he seems to always just get runs. He averages 37 with the bat and 28 with the ball in first class cricket. He's sort of this freak county cricketer. And I wonder if, this is the season where he ends up just peeling off loads at the start of the season. Then people are like, oh, hang on, why aren't we talking about this guy? And we know why, but it's fine. And the other guy I'm going to have to go for is maybe Tom Haynes. I don't know that, Sussex obviously have their issues, but I don't see any reason why that should just stop him scoring, 3 early season hundreds, and then people are very on the Haynes bandwagon.
Played a lot of cricket for the England Lions. Yeah, and he's got a decent record for the Lions too. So yeah, no, I think those are all good shouts. Next up, there are loads of players who England have dropped in the last few years who are unhappy. We talked about this last week around the stuff that Liam Livingston said in an interview with Matt Roller, where he called out the management on a few things. He alleged that essentially during the Champions Trophy last year, that he was told he was caring too much when he was looking for some technical support. And he said that the communication between him and Rob Key wasn't great. This week, just literally in the last week, we've got David Willey saying that the England hierarchy need more emotional intelligence. Reece Topley describing the Liam Livingston comments as being kind on the England management, and had a barb at Rob Key for essentially saying, well, what do you expect to have a manager who's never managed before? And then Ben Folkes, I think slightly more tellingly, but done it in a much more softly spoken, less incendiary fashion, just told an anecdote of during the 2022 tour of Pakistan that England didn't have a specialist wicket-keeping coach. So Keaton Jennings, the spare batsman, the coach, was the person who he did his drills with. Katya, what do you make of this? Because on some levels, is this just players who have been dropped being unhappy that they have been dropped, or is there something more serious to contend with. I look at someone like Reece Topley, for example, who has done well for England in the past, but I look at what he's done recently and I'm like, what are you expecting from the England management? He went at 10s in the Big Bash, didn't take a wicket in the 100, did okay in the Blast last year. That's sort of it over the last year. What sort of communication are you expecting?
Well, I think if people have accused Rob Key of not answering his phone, I think he's had reason this week to avoid answering his phone. Every time he sees it, the foreign players come out and said he's not communicating with them properly. I'm kind of with you on it. I think that this is almost a great moment of catharsis for all the players who feel, rightly or wrongly, that they have been wronged by this England kind of regime that has favoured backing people with potential over people with track records. And it's like Ben was saying before we started the podcast, you pick someone at 21, not because they're the finished article at 21, but because you think they're going to be the next big thing when they're 21. And even if you're really good at 27, you're not necessarily as good as you thought they were going to be. You're not the best player in the world at 27 that you thought they were going to be. So therefore it's more attractive to try another 21-year-old who's got that ceiling value. I do think that what's indicative of what people have said is that it's gone too far that way, in that young attributes have been prioritised over winning games of cricket at the current point in time. And I think that's almost what's been said here. But I also just think this is a moment of catharsis where everyone's having a go and getting it all out of their system before we start the next phase. Like it needs to be said now that it's going to be Rob Key and it's going to be Brendan McCullum for now at least anyway. And it's almost getting all of this out of the system before going again. But I do think it's interesting whether, like, how much this does actually affect Key and McCullum's position. My hunch is that it doesn't really affect them at the minute, but it will be interesting how much that then comes into play if England do lose a couple of matches early in the season. But lastly, on the communication point, I think strangely Ollie Robinson actually put it really well at Sussex's media day last week. He just said, yeah, the communication's not the best. Like, I wasn't given great explanation why I was dropped in 2024, but this isn't a new thing. Like, this happened under Alistair Cook. This happened, grew up in the 90s. This happened under Nasser. This happened under Atherton. Like, players can never get enough of an explanation for why they're dropped. And at the end of the day, you have to score a load of runs and take a load of wickets to get back in. And if you were doing enough of that, then you would be being picked.
One thing I think is quite interesting, Ben, is that right now it's probably easier to say this stuff, but this undercurrent of dissatisfaction around, certainly among players who are slightly older, has been around for a while now, and before England have been in this slump. So the first 18 months of the McCullum, Key, Stokes era broadly went pretty well, yet there was that level of disconnect between the county game and the international game that existed then. Why do you think that there is that level of disconnect and almost distance between the two?
Yeah, and actually
among the playing group.
Going back to what I was saying about Lancashire, actually, I think sometimes that in some ways there's a bit that has changed. Is that this England management is definitely a bit more on the selecting for reasons outside of county championship football than previous ones have been. But I think it's actually more almost the optics of it and how kind of like, in some ways, I can see if you're a county player, you feel like they're being openly dismissive of county cricket. And, I think McCullum is obviously, he is an outsider. He's not going to be embedded within the county game. And Key has, I think, for a long time been a county sceptic, and from the position of having been so embedded within it, of having played a couple games for England, but really spent a long time as a Kent captain and being in an environment that, he would probably say wasn't hugely high performance, basically, that did allow players to sort of trundle along and not do loads and still sort of get a living and still keep playing 14 game season, that kind of thing. And therefore, him then from that experience looking at England and being like, well, are we going to pick guys based on what they've done in these games? We're going to try and find other ways to do that. But I think there are ways that you can talk about county cricket and talk about the players you're selecting and about how you're going to go about it and still keep that carrot being dangled while also still taking decisions that they've had. Because there's always been room for a punt or two, and it's never been the case that England have selected purely based on who are the top run scorers or average holders or wicket takers or whatever it may be. But I do think that it's that it is reflective of an attitude. I think basically the players feel it because to some extent it's true, essentially, in a way that probably is slightly more the case than it has been before. And yet, even if you look at the selections, like there have been county championship picks in this time as well, like Duckett, county championship pick, Sam Cook, County Championship pick, like got Liam Dawson, County Championship pick. Like guys have been able to get chances.
But I guess to put forward the argument that a lot of these players are putting forward. So Livingston was saying that there's this circle, and if you're outside the circle, it's harder. And Cook and Dawson were given one test each before being moved on. I can understand it. We had Jamie Porter on the podcast recently, and he, I thought, put it in quite an interesting way. He basically said that at the moment, it feels like whatever you do beyond a certain age, they are not going to consider you. Where earlier on in his career, it felt that if you put up 2 incredible seasons, you were in the mix. And he was actually using the points that you both made earlier. He's sort of looking at it, well, I'm a better bowler now than I was when I was in my mid-20s. In my mid-20s, I got picked in an England test squad. Now no one's talking about me. So I understand why they feel that. And to me, actually, I think the biggest issue that I have with the current regime is that sort of casual approach to the hands-on cricketing stuff, basically. The folks' wicket-keeping story chimes with a lot of what we heard and have inferred from the Ashes. Key last week was saying that they're probably going to have more specialist coaches going forward. Not having wicket-keeping coach on a tour is something that the wicketkeeper didn't want to have happen. And we covered this loads during the Ashes about how England booked their mid-series trip to Noosa a year before the tour, but they don't ask Dale Steyn if he wants to be their bowling coach until 2.5 months before the tour. So I think that is the fairest thing for me. The communication thing, it's clearly not great, but I sort of agree with what Robinson said. This is a tale as old as time.
I also kind of think that when McCullum anyway, whoever's doing the selection and stuff, when they start making the decisions that everyone looks at and go, well, that's, bad shit, even though there are some good explanations for why these players are picked. I'm thinking like the spinners stuff, like the Rahan in Pakistan, the Shah Bashir and Tom Hartley in India. There were explanations for that, but when they started that, they had an awful lot of credit in the bank. And the previous regime before that weren't winning. And people were crying out at that stage to do something different, to do something outside the box, and to perhaps not even... And that was that terrible tour of Australia when people always have that existential crisis of the county championship cupboard is bare and players don't learn how to play well for England playing the county championship. And that time's almost past now. And now that McCullum and Stokes and this team has lost quite a significant series, there is so much less leverage to say that those selections make sense. And there's almost like a reactionary element to that goes towards the county championship again. And it's all cyclical. So in 4 years' time, we'll be coming back here and saying England are relying too much on the county championship and it doesn't prepare players for international cricket. And it's all a big never-ending cycle. So it doesn't actually matter that much is what I'm trying to say.
Ben, we might have a rule change this year. Substitutes.
Yeah, we definitely will have a rule change confirmed. I think confirmed today if it hadn't been confirmed before. This is basically the ECB's version of a trial that has happened in other places in the world. It happened in the Sheffield Shield. It's happened in other domestic cricket competitions as well. The county championship rules are going to be slightly different. In some ways, they're going to be a bit looser than those in the Sheffield Shield. So in the Sheffield Shield, it was just for injury that you could sub a player out. In the county championship, it's also going to be for illness, but also for significant life events too. So it can be like if you're like the birth of a child or possibly a bereavement or an illness within the family, and they're not being prescriptive about what those things could be. So you can see subs for those kind of things. In the Shield, I think they were saying it happened in sort of 1 out of every 4 games there was an injury sub. So actually we should, by that logic, see a couple this weekend. The one element of the Shield trial they're not taking on board is that in the Shield, if you had one team that had to sub out a player for injury reasons, the opposition were then given the opportunity to sub a player out for tactical reasons, as sort of a balancing thing to maybe negate the perception that a team might make an injury sub for tactical reasons. Like, well, if you do that, the other team can as well. So that sort of cancels that out. They actually found that in the Shield, teams just weren't taking that taking that opportunity. And I think that also reflects why this thing is not going to be the thing, this thing that massively changes the fabric of cricket, which is that most of the time you're going to pick your best 11 and that's your best 11. And if someone wasn't in your best 11 at the start of a game, they're not going to suddenly turn into your best player or someone in your best 11 2 days into a game. Now, it's that, and I think you almost had an interesting test case as well in the Sheffield Shield final when you had a thing that was above board, but was basically as like conniving as it could possibly look while still being completely fine. Basically, you had Victoria had this very close selection dilemma between basically who was going to be their third seamer. They went with the one guy over the other. He then bowls a full part of the first innings. He then bats in the second innings of the game, feels a bit of hamstring tightness, goes to bowl between innings, and then properly does his hamstring in that. He's distraught, it's no question that he definitely has done his hamstring, but they're able then to sub out that bowler for the guy who they almost picked. He's then completely fresh and takes the wicket with his first ball.
So that's my issue with it.
Is the freshness thing.
So do we want subs on treadmills throughout the games?
Well, I actually don't know what I think about it, because I've been to county championship games the last few years that it's a stretch to say they've been ruined by injuries. There's a famous Jordan Cox appendicitis at the Oval where he had no part of the game. So Essex literally played with 10 men in that game. That feels absurd to me. But equally, part of cricket is people feeling more and more tired across a game of cricket. And especially with a seam bowler, that's why second innings performances where you bowl 20 overs in a day on day 3 is really cool and impressive, because dealing with the fatigue of the first innings is part of it. Haven't we gone all right for 150 years? I don't know.
Yeah, and Ben Stokes made the argument that as a seam bowler, you are always injured, basically.
Yeah.
That you could always find a reason to go and have a scan and MRI machine, but there's a bit of soft tissue damage there, or my toe's bleeding, because your toe always bleeds.
Especially week 5 of the county championship where everyone's playing back to back to back to back.
Well, you've got that little chunk at the end, don't you, where there's 3 games with 2-day gaps between them. So what is it? That's 12 days of cricket in 16 days. People are going to be sore by the end of that. Is that enough reason to make a change? And I think that's why this is so far, it's still just a trial, not a full-on rule change. And I lean towards it overall improving things. And I think the evidence so far is that teams haven't taken the mickey, and that it hasn't, that there haven't been any sort of completely fast, because Victoria still lost that game. So it wasn't like it changed the course of the Sheffield Shield final. But I do see where you're coming from, for sure.
Over to the PSL, and worth saying as always that if you want more PSL and IPL content from the Wisden team, head to the Scoop that hits the Wisden YouTube channel every Tuesday and every Friday. Although this week, I think the second episode of the week is coming out on Thursday. In the PSL, Katya, loads has happened actually. Let's start with ball tampering.
Well, we started with ball tampering, so where we go after that? Pietersen has been done. He's been banned for 2 matches after he was found to have altered the condition of the ball during Lahore Qalandar's game against Karachi Kings on Sunday. He did deny the charges, and then it was taken to hearing, and he did lose the hearing. The video doesn't look...
What did he use?
I don't know. It was not clear because the video doesn't look great.
Just his nails. So there's a video of it. So they're kind of they're chucking the ball to each other, and they chuck it to Pietersen, and it looks like he basically just gets the ball and just does that basically.
So it doesn't look great. So it's Harris Ralph has been bowling, and then Shaheen Afridi comes around him, and so does Pietersen, and then they're all kind of talking, and clearly there's something going on about the ball, and then I think he takes it. So Pietersen takes it in his right hand, and he's looking at it, and he's kind of prodding at it with his thumb, and then he puts his hand over it, and that you're not holding it like that to do anything but what you're doing. And then the umpire's like, I'll have a look at that one, please, and they replace the ball. And the video doesn't look great, is what I'll say. But Pietersen did deny that he'd done anything. And
then Ben, Naseem Shah has been given the biggest fine in PCB history.
Yeah, it's a massive fine. I think he's a grade C contracted player. So I think this amounts to almost about 10 months of his yearly PCB salary. Obviously, he earns more than that playing PSL, so about 70 grand. And over a tweet which he technically didn't send. It was someone on his management team. And I guess also worryingly, what this tweet was saying is it was actually something sort of criticising the Punjab's chief minister, rather than something maybe criticising the cricket board or an umpiring decision, which you might think is more within the remit of bringing the game into disrepute. So
not to make this into a smaller thing than it is, but would this be the equivalent essentially of I don't know, Gus Atkinson tweeting his discontent about Yvette Cooper? Is it basically that?
I think basically, yeah, or not even Gus Atkinson. Gus Atkinson's, whoever runs Gus Atkinson's Twitter doing that rather than Atkinson himself. So the person who was running the Twitter account, is that their role in it is acknowledged. They've been banned with working with any PCB player for 2 years, I think.
Personally? That person who's been banned.
Yes, yeah. So that person can no longer do that job for the next 2 years. And I think it seems like possibly it was one of those things where you forget which account you logged into, basically, and that's a 70 grand and a 2-year ban mistake. So that's not ideal for Nassim. Yeah.
In the IPL, there have been lots of runs scored, which seems to be happening more and more in the IPL. But from the outside, the coolest thing is Vaibhav Suryavanshi scoring a 15-ball 50. He is just a freak, isn't he? Is there anyone like him in world sport?
Well, you laughed earlier, but I genuinely think it's a fair comparison to say that he's the Luke Littler of cricket, or that Luke Littler is the Well, did Luke Littler come first?
Yeah.
Luke Littler came first.
What came first, the Littler or the Suryavanshi?
But yeah, I think that is a fair comparison, as in they're both teenagers, they're both arguably one of the best there is at their sport. And they both have disputes over how old they are. So, but for very different reasons.
Ben, do you think we'll see Suryavanshi play for India in the next year?
It's tricky because if he were any other nationality, you'd say that he would be one of his country's better players. But India just have such a depth of talent. I mean, he is properly brilliant. So I think it is possible, and he is now eligible to do that. I think once you become 15, that's your eligible. So before this, it wasn't even a question.
But he's opening the batting with Jaiswal. That's a pretty good control to see where he's at.
Yeah, but Jaiswal's also pretty good, and he also doesn't get into the India team at the moment, doesn't he? So yeah, I mean, if he keeps on hitting 15-ball 50s every time he steps onto the park, I think they're going to struggle.
But he's been doing that for a year. He basically has done that.
Yeah, but I don't think he has, like his IPL last year, obviously the 100 was brilliant. I don't think it was, given that they were able to not pick Jaiswal and Shubman Gill in their T20I side, I wonder if they would also they can just be cautious because who are their current openers?
Well, but I mean, he bats. He's arguably as effective as Abhishek Sharma. Very similar style. It's not as if this is someone who is accumulating lots of runs but doing so quickly. He's doing it at a rate that is comparable, if not better, than Abhishek Sharma.
Yeah, but I think because
tiny sample size.
I think, and also because of his age, I think he might actually have to be like a significant amount better than the next person for them not to just be like, well, let's just wait until you're 18 and then we can start getting you in, because otherwise, like, we have someone who is as good as you and we don't risk, picking you for international cricket before you're ready and then like messing up this generation. Even though I think there's a very small chance of that happening, basically.
But is there almost an argument that maybe I'm extrapolating this because Vaibhav Suryavanchi's innings are so freak, partly because he's so young, but is his freak innings better than Abhishek Sharma's freak innings? So even if he's not quite enough better than Abhishek Sharma on a consistency basis, is his freak better than Abhishek Sharma's freak?
It's a really good question in terms of like how much are you clouded by,
because you can't not be clouded by it. As soon as you see like the baby face and you see 15 years old, like you can't not be clouded by that.
About a month after the Under-19 World Cup final, Butch made a comparison with Sobers in terms of the bat swing, and there have been some shots from Suryavanshi even in just this year that I'm like, I don't see many professional cricketers doing them. There's one shot, like a length ball he hit over long on in the Under-19 World Cup final. And then again, a length ball he hit over point, both for six, both huge sixes. I'm like, very few people do that.
But there's almost a strength thing there as well, like to have that amount of strength at 15 years old to be able to clear the boundary by as much as he does. That goes into the whole freakish thing, that is not an easy thing to do.
No, I think there's also, this is one of those facts you're not going to be able to check, as because your laptop was dead and my laptop's just died as well. But I'm pretty sure the stat is for the highest strike rate in a calendar year with a cut of games. I think maybe it's 15. His 2025 was the third highest all time. Now, second highest on that list was Abhishek Sharma, 2025, and I think the highest was weirdly Aaron Donald last year. Happened to whack it.
Nothing weird about it at all.
Yeah, but so he is doing it on a level that you very, very rarely see. Obviously, it's boosted by the fact that because he's not getting picked yet, he's able to play full seasons of the India sub, the SMAT, their sub IPL competition. And I guess if his progression improves at the rate that a normal 15-year-old improves from the age between 15 to 18, then, or even 15 to 16, 17, then yes, they'll be picking him at that point. But I do still think that they will err on the side of caution with picking him. So unless there is like a truly compelling reason to, I think they will stick with their million other, complete gun players. The two guys opening is Abhishek Sharma's got a higher rating peak than anyone else in history in T20Is, and Sanju Samson, who's just gone like basically 80, 90, 90 in the last few innings of a T20 World Cup. So I think they will be fine whether or not they pick him, and that's why I think they might not feel a bit.
But this is why I'm not selected, because the compelling aspect of it surely is he's the circus of it all. You know, he's 15. That is the compelling aspect of it. Can you put this child into international cricket and he's just better than everyone?
I mean, it's a conversation that has happened in football a lot recently around Arsenal player Max Dowman. I do think an element of it is, like, to be serious about it for a second, is should you be able to pick a child for an international sporting team? I think no. I think I'm a little bit uncomfortable about I guess, how do you protect him? Lots coming at him in a short space of time, and obviously he's dealt with it very well so far. But India don't need to pick him, so I think that's fair.
I just can't believe you've asked us for sporting comparisons to Viva Suryavansh and you've landed on Max Dowman. That's
Well, Luke Littler
Arsenal
and Max
fan
Dowman.
Yaz comes out here.
Well,
It's a great open goal he scored. Yeah.
Yeah, but that touch around Dewsbury Hall and the header as well. Anyway, story of the week by a mile. Beyers Swanepoel, so South African bowler who has got a deal with Worcestershire, or at least had a deal with Worcestershire last week. It's not 100% confirmed because the NOC bit of the deal hasn't been signed off yet. Essentially, he left the South African One-Day Cup final mid-game to travel to the UK sort of for his stint. But given that the championship doesn't start until Friday, he's got here quite early. He bowled 10 overs, basically all in a row up front, 10 of the first 23 overs, take 3 for 44, basically walks off to go to the UK. His side, the Lions, weren't able to get a substitute. The umpires didn't allow it. And yeah, the Lions players and coaches are saying that, well, they didn't know anything about it. They knew that he had to leave at some point, but it wasn't going to be that early in the game. Katya, you said before we started recording, a good point here is that the Lions coach, Russell Domingo, was actually not at the game at all.
Yeah, he was
but
at the Utility Bowl.
At least he told them that.
Yeah, he was on the outfield at Utility Bowl getting quizzed by some journos in the rain.
That is an amazing story.
It's great. Yeah, I mean,
That's so, like, even if that happened in like your club's fives, you'd be furious.
Well, he's gone from vying with Ryan Hadley for the least hyped county overseas player to now being the most hyped county overseas player, pretty much. And yeah, I mean, I think it is odd trying to work out what's gone on here because of, as you say, the 10 overs in the first 23 thing. And you wonder if they thought they were just going to be able to replace him as a sub and then it was sort of fine. But I think it's hugely just relatable, both for a club cricketer, but also for anyone who's just like maybe you're going on holiday on the Friday and you've realised you've sort of messed up your travel plans a bit, and so you're sort of soft launching, leaving a bit early. So you're sort of saying like, well, I can probably do some calls on the train, or
Have you got an early flight book next week?
I don't, but we've all been there. Or in club cricket, it's just that let me open the batting because I've got to go and pick up the kids at 4, and I'll get out, I'll have a swing, and I'll get out, and then we'll all be good. Or the alternative is we'll bat first because half our team hasn't turned up. It's huge advantage. But also, I mean, we joke about it, but can you imagine the reaction if this was, say, like the
One-Day Cup final here?
Yeah, or yes, someone just ducking out of a county championship game halfway through to go play IPL. There'd be outrage in national newspapers. So
I always think it'd be fine if he was going to play IPL though. I always think that would be more understandable than coming a week early to play a county.
That's the thing. It's a week early. It's not even to play a game. Anyway, final question comes from Scactus on the Discord, who asks, what's the air quality like where you are? Ben, can you please give us the context for this question?
Yeah, I can't. My laptop's died, so I can't read out the tweets.
I've got the tweets.
Word for word.
I could get Kevin Pietersen's Twitter up.
You do a better Kevin Pietersen than I do. So
Well, this was sent at 8:42 a.m. UK time. The air quality in Mumbai is so good. It's the best I've ever experienced. Congrats to the leadership for putting in place the necessary measures to achieve this outstanding air quality. Heart emoji, prayer emoji, India flag emoji. And then 2 hours later, so at nearly 2 hours later, at 10:03 a.m. UK time, he's replying to someone who's asking him how much money he's been paid to post this expletive. And he's replied, "You think I get paid to post about air quality? Are you effing mad? When I notice something and it really stands out, and it means something to me, I'll tweet it. Plus, that number is incorrect. It's around 40 today, which is fantastic. That's referring to the tweet he's replying to, which said the air quality index was 109. Apparently, it's actually 40. And then the PS de resistance is a topless photograph of Kevin Pietersen looking quite well sunned. which he's captioned, "An hour in the sun, no sunscreen, and I've been hammered. This is how I know the cleanliness of the air is excellent. Ouch," with a little thermometer emoji.
That's amazing. That is amazing. I kind of want to keep track on the things that Pietersen tweets about that don't have anything to do with cricket.
Well, because he tweets about a lot. I mean,
that's not the only major city he's tweeted about in the last 12 months.
No, it's not. There's that phrase about journalism, isn't there? That like, if someone tells you it's raining and someone tells you it's sunny, it's not your job to report both things. You should go outside and see if you get wet or not. And I guess with KP with the air quality, that's what it is. Go outside and see if you start coughing. And as for the air quality in here, I mean, peek behind the curtain, it's always completely frigid in here because we have a camera we can't let it get too hot, so we have to wrap up warmers. Like Yaz is always in a jacket and hat. Katya's got a very thick the jumper that would otherwise be back in the winter closet at 31st of March. So yeah, that's how it is in here.
I will say on KP is that actually I think we're downplaying his commitment to the job, that he has purposely gone out to get sunburned in order to post a damning indictment on whoever's wronged him on the air quality in Mumbai. So actually I think he's done a solid one.
Yeah, he's not one for half measures, KP, is he?
No, he definitely is not. Anyway, that's today's show. Cheers, Ben. Cheers, Katya. We'll be back next week, after which the county championship will have begun.